Hi, I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with Kai Roer, security culture advocate for KnowBe4, the world's first and largest new school security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. Kai, welcome. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here.
So Kai, to get started, tell us about KnowBe4's recent acquisition of your company, Culture. You're on the web at get.clt.re. Who is Culture, and are you continuing to operate under that brand?
So to give you that story, I need to go back a little while.
Sure.
I've been in this industry for, give or take, 25 years. And almost half of that time, I've been focusing on communication and leadership and turn that into security culture. 10 years ago, I started something called the Security Culture Framework. Basically, how do you build and maintain security culture, right? And part of that, or one of the steps there is you need to measure security culture in order to know what it is, where you want to be, and how you are actually changing it. So that's a long introduction. Now, in 2015, we had used the framework around the world, but one question came up again and again and again. Now, Kai, you say you need to measure security culture, but how do you do that, right? And I may have been a little bit slow in picking it up, but what happened was that I realized, we need to actually figure out how to measure security culture. And to do that, I teamed up with Dr. Gregor Petric at the University of Ljubljana here in Europe. His background is a social informatics. So basically, he knows how we influence computers and computers influence us. And when we talk about security culture, that's basically very simplified what we are talking about. So we set out on this quest to figure out how do we measure security culture. We started by defining it. And then when we knew what we were measuring, we had to figure out how do we measure these things. We looked at social science, picked out one way that was both scientifically valid and available or accessible by companies, surveys. And that's where we started. 5 years later, we had built a company around this. We had published a number of research around this, and we decided to team up with KnowBe4 because they are a huge global entity with a lot of data points. And our mission was to understand as much as we could on security culture. So that was a very, very good match.
Well, I think it's a great fit. I'm familiar with your background. You have a great reputation. Your company does. I think combining with KnowBe4 is going to be a great thing for the industry. So we're here today to talk about KnowBe4's 2020 Security Culture Report. Before we jump in, can you give us a 30,000-foot view of what you set out to accomplish with the report and where you collected the data from, and maybe a little history of your survey, which I know dates back a few years?
In 2015, we created this survey, right? So we needed to document what security culture is, how it is visualized, if you like, in an organization. So that was a customer prospect here. Our customers wanted to figure out what is our security culture like, and how can we change it? How can we improve it and document that change? Now, that is one use case, right? But the other one, which Gregor and myself recognized very early on, is that not only do one organization want to figure out what they are like, but we need to be able to compare them to other organizations not only in that country or in that industry sector, but around the world. So that's when we decided to take all this data, analyze it on a very high level, and build a benchmarking report on industries around the world.
I'm curious to know, in your opinion, do most organizations actually have a security culture? And what size is an organization when they do have one? Do you typically see this in mid-sized to large organizations, or are there actually small companies that have a security culture?
So to answer that question, we need to look at the definition of culture. So not only security culture, but culture in general. And culture is something that happens when two people or more people get together. So that means that it happens in any organization with more than one person. So two people or more. And bringing that back to your question, do all companies have security culture? The answer would be no, because you would need more than one employee in that company in order to have a culture.
The definition of security culture, should that be something that our entire industry can, put their arms around, have a common definition, or is it something that should be specific to each company?
So from my perspective, which is to figure out how we can actually measure this in a useful way so we can have useful learning conversations about this, I believe that we need one definition for the industry. So security culture is one specific thing that all organizations have more or less of, or a better or worse quality of. And I believe that we need this because by everybody understanding and talking about the thing, we can actually take this discussion to the next level instead of trying to figure out what your security culture is and what my definition of security culture is. We can agree that this is security culture, and then we can figure out how to actually improve it and work with it.
So if I'm the CISO at a Fortune 500 company, I've got a lot of employees, tens of thousands of users out there. Just give it to me quickly if I don't understand it. What is security culture?
Sure. I will give you two definitions. The first one is what I usually refer to more as a layman or practitioner definition. This is the one we use at the Security Culture Framework. And the definition there of security culture is the ideas, the customs, and the social behavior of a group, or in this case, an organization, that influence that group's security. So basically, it's the ideas, it's the habits, it's all the things we do as a collective that influence our security. Now, for most of us, most of the time, that definition is more than enough. We can start there, we can start figuring out how we can work with it. But as Dr. Petris told me very, very early on, from a scientific perspective, that definition is too broad and not really measurable. And since I wanted to measure culture, we need to figure out how can we redefine it in a measurable way. And that's the second definition we have. So security culture is the attitudes, the behaviors, the communication, compliance, cognition, norms, and responsibilities of people in a group and how they work with these different things. That forms the security culture.
So in your report, Kai, there's a scale or an index score from 0 to 100, which measures security culture for the 17 industries that you covered. That's 17, with 100 being the best possible score. Which industries, if any, scored high, let's say 90 or above, or if not, which industries came in with the best scores?
So yeah, I know that you have seen the report, so you know that that's a trick question. Unfortunately, no one scored above 90, far from it, in fact, which tells us something that is also worth discussing at some point, I think. We need to up the game, right? We need to figure out how we can actually improve much beyond those levels we are today. But that's probably something in a different conversation. The best scoring companies were banking, as a banking sector, and financial services. They both have a score of 76. Then insurance have a score of 75, and the same with technology sectors.
So you're right to an extent. It was a trick question because I wanted to drive home the point that, companies aren't scoring as high as they need to. But let me ask you this. Are there some companies you've come across, Kai, in your career and most recently where they do have an unusually high score? Are there some select companies that are doing much better than others?
Yes, they are that. In one of the comments we made in this report, we actually point to that fact that even within specific industry sectors, like, for example, the government sector, the sector as a whole is scoring fairly badly. So one of the worst, actually. But within that same sector, government, we have a best in class, and that's best of class only in that sector, not only in the sector, but across the full sample with a score of 86, which means that it is possible, but it also means, to your previous question, to the point you make there, it's still not good enough. We still need to up the game, right?
So which industry scored the worst?
That would be education.
Surprising. Education, the educators. That's kind of surprising to me. You know, you would think that educators who are in the business of educating would have scored higher.
I would agree with you if you said it's scary, because you would expect someone who teaches the following generation to be better at what they are supposed to be teaching the next generation. But I also think, if we are brutally honest, that the education sector is one of those sectors that we have, not really given the full attention that we should have for the past, I don't know, 30, maybe 50 years, depending on which country you are in. And as a result, I think that they may be lagging behind, not because they don't really care or not want to do better, but maybe because they don't have the resources and haven't had the resources for a long, long time.
So, Kai, the report talks about attitudes and behaviors, and you actually devote a section to both of those separately. And this refers to employee attitudes towards cybersecurity and the actions and activities that they take. Tell us what these terms mean and what types of scores from which industries are worth calling out.
Attitudes and behaviors are two of those 7 dimensions that we measure security culture on. So they're two of those 7 parts that together makes the definition of security culture from a scientific perspective. And when we look at those 2 dimensions, attitudes are looking at what is your, and by your, I mean not only you as an individual, but also you within the context of your organization. So yours and your colleagues' attitudes, so feelings and beliefs that you have towards security. And security here is also a broad scope, right? Both protocols, issues, what you are supposed to be doing versus what you see are doing, and versus what you feel like doing. And attitudes then is one of the crucial parts of security culture from our perspective.
Right. So you're going to have a problem with an employee who comes in and, their attitude is, it's not going to happen to me. It's being overblown, have, kind of a cavalier attitude towards, anything from phishing scams to, some of the other, cyber threats that are out there.
A couple of years ago, a little bit more than a couple of years ago, some time ago. Let's be nice. I was working with someone who did a stint in Russia, and we discussed security culture and attitudes. And one of the things he said to me that stuck with me was this: Kai, here in Russia, we don't need security products. We don't need security protocols because we are so good as individuals. Now, that's an attitude problem for you right there.
Right. Okay. I get it. So let me ask you about, industries that are regulated. So let's take banking and finance, for instance. Are they inherently doing better because of the regulation and the compliance, or not? Is there a correlation between those two?
So there is a certain political sting to that question, and there is also a cultural perspective to that question. So before I answer, I will let everybody know that I am not American, I am a Norwegian. And over here in Norway, we have a different way of thinking and a different ideology, a different culture, if you like. So I will frame my question within that culture. I do believe that, yes, we can read correlation between the scores of the security culture industry sector that are doing better than the others based on number of factors, one of them being regulation. I also think that we should really dig deeper into that question and see how strong that correlation is, and if it is across all industry sectors or if it's just those few, like, for example, financial and financial services, banking, insurance, where we have it. Because you have another top scoring industry like technology, and I'm not entirely sure that we could use the same explanation of regulatory strength to explain their high scores.
So I do have to just mention quickly, I had a delicious piece of Norwegian salmon last night.
Nice. I hope you enjoyed.
Had to throw that in there. You do have some of the best salmon in the world, or I'm sure you'd say the best. So let's go back to the security culture index or score. Let's take education, not doing well. What can organizations in that space be doing in general? Why are they lacking? What do you think they need to be doing to lift that score?
On page 39 of our security culture report, we show the statistics for all of the educational sectors. So one of the things you will see there is that the security culture in general for the sector as a whole is rather poor at 68. If you take a look at the box plot to the right of the tables, you will also see that the collection, or most, so the 25 to 75% of the answers are quite close. This tells us that the variation is rather small, which again suggests that this is a strong artifact, if you like. Basically, it means that it's something that says a lot about the whole industry. The larger the variation, the less that strength would be, the more other potential explanations may be in there. Now, if you then start looking at the dimensions here, and let's say that we pick out cognition, which in security culture is all about how you take information, how you interpret that information, and how you act on that information. So all the cognitive abilities, we see that this is a very weak, so even weaker than the average in the educational sector. Now, what can they do then? Well, I think that in this particular sector, so education, it would help by informing the teachers and the teachers' unions and the whole, the whole sector about the importance of cybersecurity and security, and that probably means that we need to do it differently than what we have done in the past. Maybe run more hands-on workshops, maybe demonstrate to them, in their face, the password cracking mechanisms and the weak spots of those things. But that being said, I also believe that there are some deeper issues in the sector, possibly connected to politics and power internally, which obviously also is being seen in cultures. I think what I'm saying is that it's not as easy as just giving one or two tips and then you will solve it. But I think that should not be an excuse not to start working on it.
So Kai, before we let you go, talk to us a little bit about the future. Culture is a KnowBe4 company now. You've done great work in the industry. The 2020 report, extremely valuable, jam-packed with great information. What can we expect next year? Are you going to produce this report again as you have been?
Well, this report in the larger context, right? So one of the reasons that KnowBe4 and Culture decided to join forces is the huge data set available with KnowBe4 customers. In this report, we had 120,000 employees responding to the survey. In our previous report, we had 11,000 something. So it's a 10-fold increment here. Next year, I expect to see somewhere between 500,000 and a full million respondents. And I expect to see much more outside of the United States. So one of the things we are aiming for are regional reports. So not only industry sector, but also taking a look at how does US do it compared to Kenya, or how do South Africa do it comparing to Brazil, or Australia comparing to Norway, those kind of things. And the reason I want to do that is that we believe that kind of knowledge, that kind of understanding is going to help us and the industry to figure out what do we need to do to actually change and actually improve security out there.
So can we get a standing date with you and have you come back on next year and talk to us about the 2021 report?
Yes, please.
Okay, so before we leave off, Kai, if you can just tell our audience where can they get the report if they haven't seen it and want to download?
Yes. So the report is available at knowbe4.com, and there's a link there in the top menu called Resources. You click on Resources, it opens this submenu. There you see the Security Culture Report 2020.
Great. Kai, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. Joining me today was Kai Roer, Managing Director at Culture, a KnowBe4 company. To learn more about our sponsor KnowBe4, visit knowbe4.com. You can watch all of our videos at cybercrimemagazine.com.